You don't need to be exceptional at every single thing that you do. You just don't. You can be good at a couple things. Maybe you're good at your job and you're a good mom, right? Like those two things work. And maybe everything else you're just average or even below average at. Who cares? Pick those things that matter to you. Be good at those things. Put energy in those things that matter. Hello, and welcome back to the EmpowerHer Podcast. I keep seeing women talk about how they feel so behind, how they're not doing enough, how they're not successful enough. Meanwhile, men are doing the bare minimum and getting praised for it, which in my mind is unacceptable. I say this very, very humbly, like there's not a conceited bone in my body when it comes to this. But if a man knew all the thoughts that run around in my head at every single moment of the day, they would go insane. They would be absolutely shocked. And the thing is that most of my friends, like if you were to poll my friends and my family and ask them what they think of me, they would say that I'm an organized person, that I have my shit together, that I have it all going on. But what they don't realize is the thought process that goes behind that, is the constant thought, the constant planning, analyzing that goes on behind that to get to a place where I am organized, where I have my shit together. And that's where the problem is. And I can say this with confidence that I am way above an average man, way above an average man. And again, I don't want to like bash men here. Y'all know my thoughts on the situation, but I just say this humbly. I think that oftentimes people and men don't recognize what women have to do to show up as themselves and to show up as the great version of themselves that everyone sees, not to mention women of color, neurodivergent women, etc. And, when we talk about this, we aren't even talking about those extra situations that women have to endure all the time, like their menstrual cycle, like added expectations, all of those things. We're not even taking that into consideration when we talk about this. And then we expect women to be amazing at everything. And then we're surprised when they get burned out, right? We have to excel at work. We have to look good. We have to be emotionally intelligent, right? We have to be great partners. We have to stay fit. We have to be amazing mothers. We have to maintain friendships. We have to heal our own trauma, right? And somehow through all of this, we have to stay calm and regulated and have a regulated nervous system. It's kind of a joke. And, I was one of these people. I felt like I had to always be perfect and show up perfectly and be amazing at everything. And it caused me to burn out. And, something that I've shared pretty openly is that I've always known that I want to be a mom. It's something that since I was a child, I've known. It's just this deep knowing that I've had that I'm meant to be a mom in this lifetime, which, can be really beautiful. But also I'm 32, I'm turning 33 this year. And I also have this feeling of like, when am I going to be ready? Maybe I'm not ready for that yet, right? And so a lot of that comes from feeling this pressure to do everything right in my career or in whatever it is that I'm doing, to feel this pressure to do everything right. And if I'm not doing everything right, then, I'm not ready for this next step, this next phase in my life. So I really want to talk about this pressure that women feel specifically to be exceptional in everything that they do, and kind of what happens when you decide that, being average at something makes you less worthy, because at the end of the day, it doesn't. And you don't, and you shouldn't have to overperform to earn rest, to have ease, or to have success. Through society, women are raised and trained and coached to be overachievers, whether it's academically, emotionally, rationally. They are absolutely trained to be overachievers. And the thing is high performance was expected because we needed to prove ourselves to the male species. Now, that sounds crazy, but that is actually what happened. And, I love my family and I never want to say anything negative, but yeah, I have a brother and we did have different expectations. We are less than 2 years apart. I'm older and I had different expectations put on me than he did. I had much higher standards on me than he did. And it could also be the dynamic of like oldest sibling versus like a middle sibling or like the second sibling. There's 3 of us. But I did feel like there was different expectations put on us. And even with my family, specifically my European side of the family, I noticed a lot of those like patriarchal habits, like, when we would go to family's house, the girls were asked to clean the dishes and set the table and do all those things while the boys could just hang out and have fun. Never understood why that was a thing. So it did show up in these micro ways all of the time. And, even growing up, it was like they were just happy. My parents were just happy my brother was alive versus like if I got a B on a test and it was like the end of the world, right? So it was not the same situation. And even in the workplace, average performance from women is judged much more harshly than average performance from men. And, when I was in corporate, something that happened that really stuck with me was, I was someone that worked really, really hard. I gave 200% everything I did at work. I really did. I tried my hardest. I always wanted to be perfect, overachieving, did the overtime if needed. And when I was promoted to being a team leader, someone told me, another woman in a similar position as me, she was much older than me. She told me that the only reason, well, she implied, but she said the reason my boss likes me is because I'm blonde and have big boobs. And honestly, that was like super hurtful to hear from another woman, that she would say this to me in a workplace rather than building me up and seeing all the work that I put on the table, because I did give a lot of effort. She did as well, but that doesn't take away from me giving a lot of effort. And I don't know what my looks had to do with it, because she was taking away the effort that I put in just because of how I looked. And I think that social media has really played a huge role in amplifying this. Even if we just look at people, having the perfect morning routine, perfect bodies, perfect homes, perfect jobs, right? It creates this gap of like, okay, I'm seeing all this on social media. My life doesn't look like that. So that must mean there's a problem, right? And as women rise professionally, we feel like we must be extraordinary just to justify our seat at the table. I work with a lot of clients, I work with basically mainly women, high achievers. A lot of them are very high up in their fields, and yet still the imposter syndrome is rampant. They constantly talk to me about how they don't feel good enough. I was actually just listening to a podcast, or I think it was a clip, and basically it was someone that was, she has her own business and she's in this like celebrity business world with people like Emma Grede and things like that. And she was at this like dinner that Emma Grede hosted. She's like she does product for like all the Kardashians brands like Skims, Good American, things like that. So she's like, super well known, super high up. You would argue she's in the top of her field. And she hosted a dinner with some other entrepreneur women, similar vibes of like this kind of celebrity adjacent influencer types that have businesses, but all successful women in their own right. And she was basically saying how every one of the women stood up to share their story, and they all shared that they felt intimidated being in front of this group of women. And this is like, we're talking about the top of the top, the creme de la creme of like business women, of people that are like very well known, have successful businesses, and they're all saying they have imposter syndrome. That's a problem. Do you think the men who are at that level having conversations, saying to each other, oh, I have imposter syndrome, I'm not good enough? No, they don't. No, they don't. And I'm not blaming women, right? We've been socialized to feel this way. We've been socialized to act this way. There's a reason that we have this imposter syndrome, but it's just interesting to see that. And then once we add, if you're a woman of color or if you're neurodivergent, like it adds another layer of pressure, another layer of society and societal programming that comes to that really affects how we show up and affects the way that we see ourselves in these situations. And, the thing is that this has a cost. The cost of trying to excel at everything is that we end up burned out. And we disguise burnout as ambition, right? We literally, as women, kill ourselves. We kill ourselves to do it all, to get to where we want to be. Anxiety is often disguised as drive, right? Like we have this drive and ambition, but really it's burnout and anxiety and stress in the back of it. And we are constantly so over anxious about being seen, about feeling worthy, that we end up as women working ourselves to the bone because we feel like that's the only way we can prove ourselves that we are good enough. That's the only way we can prove ourselves, rather than just knowing that what we're doing is enough, because we never think what we're doing is enough. And that's the problem. There never is enough. And, we want to be the dependable friend, the emotional caretaker, the one that remembers everything, right? And, I had a period in my life where I was so burnt out that I could no longer be a good friend. And I did an episode on this where I basically was saying that I was so burnt out in my work life and just everything that was going on that I could no longer be a good friend. I didn't have the emotional, physical capacity to hang out with my friends, to call them, to text them. And I felt really guilty about it. I felt very, very guilty about it. I thought something was wrong with me. I was like, why don't I want to hang out with my friends? I, generally speaking, am a pretty social person, although since COVID, it's changed a lot. But I had all these feelings and I didn't understand why I didn't want to spend time with my friends. And I had to realize afterwards that it was because I was burnt out, right? And we have this constant self-surveillance as women of like, am I doing enough? Am I achieving enough? Am I looking the part enough, right? And it's almost like we can never rest. We can never truly rest because we're constantly thinking about and mulling over these situations. And honestly, we lose joy because everything becomes a performance. I have felt that in my life where I feel like I'm like, okay, I technically have everything I want. I have a great life, but I feel like I'm constantly on. I feel like I'm constantly performing. And because of that, I can't actually enjoy what I'm going through. I had a conversation with someone about this. She's about, like 10, 15 years older than me. And she was saying how like she can never enjoy the moment. And she's also someone who's like super high achieving, a mom, all of those things. And she was like, I can never enjoy the moment because I'm always thinking about what's next or what's going to happen. And I felt the same way. I felt so seen because I can't enjoy where I am. I often felt that like when I would go on vacation, that I couldn't enjoy myself fully on vacation because I was always thinking about what I had to do when I got home and I couldn't be present in the moment on vacation. And then when I got home, I was like, damn, like I feel like I didn't get the most out of the vacation, or I didn't feel rested or rejuvenated because I was constantly thinking about other things. So, it really is like comparing ourselves and wanting to be perfect and wanting to do everything everyone else can is really damaging. And instead of that, what we need is more resources, right? We need more support as women. We need all of those things. And, last week or a couple weeks ago on the podcast, we talked about billionaires and not comparing ourselves to people in those situations because they are doing it all, but they're not doing it all by themselves, right? Like they have the help and support. We need to look at our life and look at what's realistic for us, of what we're capable of, what's possible for us, and basing our life off of that and not trying to do everything else and looking at everyone else and seeing what they're doing. And, at the thing is that, and I've been talking about this a lot with my clients, asking them what their hobbies are, what their self-care routines are, and just talking about like, you don't need to be elite at everything that you do. And specifically when we talk about things like hobbies or self-care, things like that are just for fun, you don't have to be good at everything. You don't have to be a good cook. You don't have to be good at cleaning your house. You don't have to be the most organized person in the world, right? Like you can be good at a couple things. Maybe you're good at your job and you're a good mom, right? Like those two things work. And maybe everything else you're just average or even below average at. Who cares? Pick those things that matter to you, those 2, 3 things max that matter to you. Be good at those things. Put energy in those things that matter. And then the rest of it, either outsource it if you can. If you can't, do the bare minimum. You don't need to be exceptional at every single thing that you do. You just don't. And you don't have to be a top performer at work to have a great career. I talk about this with my clients all the time, is you don't have to work and give over 100% in order to be successful at your job or to get promoted at the end of the day. You just don't. Doing your job in a way that makes sense, being efficient, is important. But working 90 hours a week when you have a 40-hour job, or always doing the most, always saying yes, always breaking your back, like that's not the right environment for you. And you don't have to do that in order to get promoted. And I think that that's a big myth, is that you have to give 200% to get promoted. And maybe in some places you do. Maybe in some places that's the ask and that's the vibe, but maybe that's not the right company for you. Maybe that's not the right vibe for you. So just think about, being average at some things can actually free your nervous system. It can help you to do things just because you want to, like, especially when we're talking about things like hobbies. Like, you can just do hobbies for the fun of it. You don't have to do them because you need to be exceptional and good and whatever at them. So just something to consider there as well is, like, it's okay to just do things for fun and to regulate your nervous system, or because you enjoy doing it, not because you feel like you need to be perfect at it. I really want to redefine what success looks like for yourself. And I think that that could be really important to help reframe what this really looks like and start deprogramming some of those things that you've been thinking or that you've learned or that you've grown up with. So ask yourself, what do I actually want to be exceptional at? So again, pick 1, 2, max 3 things. And again, this can change depending on the life you're in right now, right? So I'm focusing on those 2 things, my career and my relationship, not everything else in my life. The next thing is ask yourself, what parts of my life matter to me, not society? So understanding what are those things that are important to you. Maybe you've been taught that you do need to have an exceptional career, and maybe for you, that's not what you want to do. Maybe you don't want to climb the corporate ladder, and that is absolutely positively okay. Decide those things that are important to you, not to someone else. Define what enough looks like for you. Again, society can really define this for us. I'm talking financially, emotionally, energetically. Really sit down and say, okay, what is enough for me? What does enough look like for me? And just do that. It doesn't matter what you see on social media. It doesn't matter what you see other people doing. Maybe for you, it's flying first class, but you don't need to have a crazy expensive or whatever kind of car, right? Like, that's a silly example, but just as an example of things like of what works for you and what doesn't work for you, you get to decide that. Society doesn't get to decide that. And success doesn't have to look like scaling ladders or hitting milestones necessarily. Success can look like peace. It can look like balance. It can look like autonomy. It can look like creativity, or look like a regulated nervous system. It's up to you to decide and define what that looks like for you. And the thing is that you're also still allowed to desire more. It's okay to desire more. It's okay to want more from your life. It's just about not feeling like you need to carry that world onto you and constantly have that. So, just to kind of recap is like, you don't have to perform womanhood, and your value doesn't depend on your constant achievement. I know we've been taught that, but I'm giving you permission to say to yourself that your value and your worth doesn't depend on your achievements. And you're allowed to do less. You're allowed to rest, and you're allowed to be, that version of yourself that is absolutely you. And that's still powerful. And that's still a great version of you, regardless of what anyone else says. So as always, I have some reflection prompts for you. If this episode really hit home, I think that these would be really great to journal on, or to even voice note to yourself or think about. So reflection prompt number 1 is, where am I holding myself to an unrealistic standard, and why? Reflection prompt 2, what would good enough look like in this season of my life? Reflection prompt 3, what am I allowed to be average at without shame? So definitely do these reflection prompts. I think they would be super, super helpful. And I hope you enjoyed this episode, really talking about, how it's really not about women, trying to do the most. Like, we're taught to be so exceptional. We're taught to be the best at what we do, but we don't need to do that. We don't need to do that to be worthy to show up, and we can redefine what success looks like to us in a way that works for us in our season of our life. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I hope you all have an amazing, fabulous week, and I'll catch you in the next episode.